our tagline, fly personal. Some people say, well, it's because you personalize the experience. And yes, to some extent we do, but it's more about the reason that we exist and what we're solving for people is personal to them.
Welcome to the Luxury Travel Innovators podcast. I'm your host, Adam Deflorian, founder and CEO of AZDS. Let's take off. Today I'm joined by David Zipkin, co-founder and chief commercial officer of Tradewind Aviation. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Adam.
It's great to be here at your millionaire FBO in Westchester.
Yeah, thanks for coming all this way. And I know we have a lot more snow than Colorado, but we'll try to send some your way.
I would appreciate it because we need some to ski on, at least in March. And it was a piece of cake coming up from the city on the train, 30 minutes.
Good.
It was easy.
Good.
So can you tell our listeners a little bit about your background and how you co-founded Tradewind with your brother?
Yeah, sounds good. Happy to. Depends on how far back you'd like to go, but our father flew for fun. He was a private pilot. He actually learned to fly during on the GI Bill after the war. I had been an older father. And he was really, I know the word entrepreneur is tossed around quite a bit these days, but he was salt of the earth entrepreneur. You know, he grew up with next to nothing. He was a child of the Depression era, and I think he learned at a young age that if you want to do something, you have to take control of it. And it was all about starting businesses, and more specifically, solving problems, which becomes a business. And he kind of raised us to think that way. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, even just sitting on a train somewhere, he would point at something and say, "That's It's hard to pick that up. Let's draw a better way to do that." And so everything that he really thought about, and of course that translated to how we think, was about closing a gap and making a business out of that. That's what business is all about. And so we grew up flying for fun. We had a little Cessna, little 4C Cessna. Grew up flying. We used to do what they call the $100 hamburger. You take the plane to Martha's Vineyard for a burger, and that's your excuse for firing up the airplane. I think it's the $1,000 hamburger at this point.
Were you flying from Oxford, or where were you going from?
We were the plane was based in Danbury, which is just up the road from here. We kind of caught the bug when we had a passion for it. And so when it became time to kind of think about what we wanted to do, number one, it was not going to be doctor, lawyer, or banker. I think he would have thrown us out of the house. It was what kind of business can we start? And aviation is what we knew. My brother took a job early on with a charter operator, actually out of here in Westchester. It's kind of a mom and pop, which many charter operators are. And it was, mom, pop, and my brother. And he learned quite a bit at a very young age. My brother is really the propeller head of the family. The nuts and bolts of it. He really likes the deep dive on regulatory framework and, of course, flying, and he geeks out on it. And he learned lots of things. He also learned that the market for what we ultimately started doing was really underserved, and I'm talking about regional travel, shorter distance, private, and then ultimately semi-private travel. At the time even, you had big jet operators like NetJets and so forth. But if you wanted to fly to Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, East Hampton, it was really kind of a hodgepodge of crap, to put it bluntly. Single pilot, older aircraft, no level of service to speak of. Sometimes questionable safety, maintenance, et cetera, and older equipment, older aircraft. Around that time, the single-engine turbine-powered aircraft was really starting to come of age, which is a stronger power plant, bigger cabin, more sophisticated, safer. And we said, okay, well, this is the gap that we see, the shorter distance stuff. Let's buy an aircraft and go for it. And I remember the day that we bought the airplane. We actually bought it out of a repo from a charter operator that tried the same thing as we were about to try.
And didn't have the same success.
No, it was it was sadly sitting in an impound, if you will, at a hangar up in Maine. So we bought the airplane. I remember sitting in the seat with him and looking at each other, thinking, okay, now what? So, no business plan to speak of, just let's get an airplane and try this. And we put our shingle out for private charter. We put our shingle out for pretty much anything. And in the early days, You take any business that comes your way. We were flying cargo, we were flying passengers, we were flying all different things. Those cargo journeys were quite fun, going up, picking up a load in Buffalo, dropping it in Montreal, coming back all at middle of the night. But the business of flying passengers, the on-demand private charter, really started to ramp up because again, nicer aircraft, much higher level of service. And we also made the decision at the outset, even though it's a single pilot aircraft, to fly with two pilots because it adds a very important level of safety. It really started taking off. And what we saw in the early days was that the traffic patterns were pretty regular. So we were flying a lot of people to the Cape and Islands, Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, and so forth. And they were going weekly. They were going out on Friday, back on Sunday. And they were often, it was a group of people that really knew each other too, mostly Wall Street guys back in the day. And, they kind of approached us and said, well, we're all doing the same thing. We don't take all the seats. Can we share a charter? And we said, sure, as long as somebody's paying the bill, that's fine. And that was really the beginnings of what ultimately became our scheduled service. So it was kind of created as a crowdsourced shared charter. And so I remember we used to get on AOL Instant Messenger back in the day, and Bob and Joe would go, say, hey, we'd like to go this weekend. We say, okay, what time? They would instant message all of their friends, come back 5 p.m. 5 p.m. is the time. Great, that's your flight. And that was, how our scheduled flights began. And then now, flash forward to today, we're flying, and we can talk about it more in detail later, but we're flying in 3 regions, 36 airplanes, and about 50% scheduled and 50% on-demand private charter. And we've also migrated to a much more sophisticated airplane, the Pilatus PC-12.
What was the airplane back in the day?
Cessna Grand Caravan.
A Caravan.
Which I have a place in my heart for Cessna Grand Caravans. They're workhorses. They do everything from cargo to passenger service. Very strong, very capable aircraft. They're just a little bit slow.
Yeah.
And so the Pilatus added a lot of speed and also pressurization, which allows us to fly high, faster, and it's an added level of safety being at those higher altitudes. Yeah.
Was this Eric flying it back in the day? The first, he was captain.
Yeah,
and you were co-pilot.
Yeah, Eric was flying. We had a group of 5 or 6 pilots. Yeah. Beyond that, I was not co-piloting. I was trying to get the butts in the seats and running around the airport, slinging bags, doing everything that we could to keep it going. And we decided at the outset, and this is a very unsexy idea and very not current, but we decided at the outset to grow organically. And we knew that would take much more time. Yeah. But even then, we looked around the aviation landscape, and it's kind of littered with companies that try too much too quickly. It's a very, very tough business to make money in, and sustainability for us is incredibly important. So over the years, we've never grown faster than we could afford to grow. Yeah. Which has served us well. It took a long time, but sustainability is incredibly important to us.
Well, like we talk about over the many years we've known each other, there's not many players standing left. There's a lot of ideas, and it works for a short amount of time. Yeah. And they accrue an incredible amount of debt and don't realize how expensive aviation really is.
Yeah, it's really a game of how much money can you raise and how long can you wait it out before you ultimately make money. And again, there's a history littered with companies where that didn't work out, and we didn't want to be one of them. It keeps getting tried, the finance world loves to invest in aviation. Yeah. Sometimes without the due diligence that they would normally do, because it's kind of a sexy business, and it doesn't always work out.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, because you've had an incredible success, and the amount of airplanes that you're flying with the number of bases is amazing. So
thank you.
Of course. So talk to us a little bit about the difference between private charter and pure ownership. I'm always interested to hear everybody's take on this.
Yeah, great question. To me, it's really about how much you fly, how much your need is. Of course, there are people who own private jets and don't really need it all that often. And if you have the money to do that, then more power to you. But at that point, it's more of a privacy ego thing. Yeah. But if you're looking at it from a dollars and cents standpoint, you really don't need to own a plane until, you were talking about hundreds of hours per year in usage. There is an in-between step, fractional ownership,
Okay.
where you buy one portion of the aircraft, and that brings that number down a little bit. And so, in the on-demand private charter world, we serve the perfect client for us is someone who flies, 50 to 100 hours a year. More than that, it may make sense to start considering those other programs. The other thing with charter, other advantage with charter is that with any flight, there's a right tool for each flight.
Yep.
We chose to focus on the shorter distance regional travel, and the Pilatus PC-12 is just perfect for that.
Yeah.
From up to about 600 miles down to 0, it's just the perfect aircraft for it. It's incredibly efficient. It can get into small runways, often closer to where you're going or where you're coming from, saving quite a bit of time. And compared to a jet, it's as I said, much cheaper to operate. And it's fast for turboprop, but it's not as fast as a jet. So if you're going 600,000 and up miles, it makes more sense to be in a jet. And then there are different categories of jet, of course. You look outside the window here, we've got mostly big ones actually sitting there.
Yeah.
But smaller jets take you, New York, Florida is a good example of a common route there. But you need, of course, a larger jet to go over to Europe and so on. And so when you own a plane, you're kind of locked into that plane.
Yeah.
When you charter, you can use the right tool for the job, which we feel is very important. It's just wasteful to take a large jet to Nantucket from New York.
And can be slower, right? Because the FAA, the way you're going to be routed, I would assume, is that very different than the way you guys get routed.
I think I've told you this over the years.
You've taught
me.
me.
At some point, I taught you.
You've taught me everything I know about aviation.
Don't quote me on anything, though. With a larger jet, you often get routed because it's faster. You often get worse routing, which ends up taking more time. Our pilots love. We fly a lot out of Teterboro to Nantucket, and of course, Teterboro is one of the top business aviation airports in the world. And they love when they're waiting for takeoff. There's a Gulfstream in front of them, also going to Nantucket. We're going to Nantucket. And the Gulfstream takes off first, we take off second, we get there first.
Yeah.
Because the Gulfstream was routed up through, Massachusetts and, Vermont or something and all the way back down. And we can go more direct, depending on the conditions. So it's just the right tool for so many reasons.
Yeah. And we just went out there on the ramp and walked in one of your newer Pilatus. I mean, it's extremely comfortable. It's an interior very similar to what you find on a larger jet, right?
Yeah, that's right. And that was really the transition point around the time that we founded the company, is that the Cessna Grand Caravan, when they built it, they had an option for what they called an executive configuration, which really feels like a private jet inside.
It's great. Talk to us a little bit about the destinations that you serve besides what we just covered with, Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, which we can get to again as well. But I'm curious to hear about the St. Bart's expansion. Obviously, you have such a domination in that market, and obviously the best way to get there in terms of quality in the airplane getting there. But talk to us a little about St. Bart's as well as the rest of the Caribbean, and then we'll get to Florida.
And then Florida. Well, I'll start in the Northeast. We'll kind of do the circle.
Okay.
So Northeast is where we started flying and we built the fleet up to about 6 airplanes. And then one day we saw that the planes weren't flying very well in the winter. So let's try to find somewhere where it's warmer and there's more activity in the winter. So, and just before I get off the Northeast, it's 4 routes. It's Westchester and Teterboro, Nantucket, and Martha's Vineyard. We will be adding new routes this summer, TBD.
Exciting.
Can't announce them yet. And then beyond that, it's private charter on demand wherever you want to go. So the plane is perfect for anything, if you imagine, in about a 600-mile radius. So we do quite a bit of that flying during all parts.
Covers an awful lot of the population in the United States.
Absolutely.
600 miles from here is pretty much everything, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We're in Boston and D.C., up to Canada. We're all over the place with the private charters. And so in about 2006, we went south looking for work.
Okay.
And in the Eastern Caribbean, St. Bart's just jumped out as the perfect use for the aircraft, where we could be most useful. Number one, the level of service in the Caribbean generally, even to this day, but especially back then, was really poor. And when you look at a place like St. Bart's, where the luxury product on the island, the hotels, the 5-star hotels and so forth, are doing such a good job, and you contrast that with the way to get there that existed at the time, it was just, it was mind-blowing to see this. Someone's getting off of a Gulfstream, transferring to a 50-year-old airplane, single pilot, windows out with the cigarette type of thing, and then going to the Eden Rock Hotel. There was just a huge mismatch. It's a unique airport, as most people know, very short runway. The Pilatus is perfect for short runways. And so we said, okay, great. This is where we can add the most value. We started flying there with just private charter and then expanded to scheduled flights. And now we have currently 14 airplanes in the Caribbean right now running between 40 and 60 flights a day to not only St. Bart's, but Anguilla, Virgin Gorda, Tortola, Antigua, and St. Thomas.
Wow.
Our base down there is in the San Juan Airport, which is a great hub for airline connectivity, also for a private jet connection. And that's going very well. You've flown with us down there?
Absolutely. The first time I flew into St. Bart's, I had your initial experience that you just described because we had clients in St. Bart's, but not quite you yet as a partner. Yeah. And so I flew on one of the local carriers, and you nailed the experience. Yeah. I think there was a cigarette out the window, and I was co-pilot. I got to sit up front, which was nice.
They usually put the pretty girl up front for weight and balance.
Weight and balance.
But I remember the first time I flew over was not on us. It was before we started the business, and it was in one of these very old airplanes, and I'm sitting next to this French guy who looks at me right before we take off, and he grabs the handle in front of me, and he says, "Courage," because that's kind of how it feels in those older airplanes, and that landing. So solving that problem was just such a slam dunk.
You did solve
much higher level of service, amazing. In the way that we do everything. Everywhere, it's a huge contrast to how traditionally the Caribbean aviation world is.
And the transfer experience in San Juan also, it starts there, right? The St. Martin experience in transferring, I remember going through that first time, and somebody already had my belt and watch, and they were putting the belt on. I said, "Hey, why? That's my belt." And of course, he backed off very quickly and gave me my watch and my belt back. But that was the experience going through the security to get to where the local carriers are to get to St. Bart's. And in San Juan, it's a flawless experience to your lounge and just makes it so much better.
Yeah, the connectivity is much better. Number one, there are about 10x the amount of flights coming in to connect to the rest of the world versus St. Martin. It's U.S. territory, so you come in, you don't have to do customs twice, only once on the return. We've as you've seen, we've created our own private space there. Yeah. Most of our flying, we've been talking about private jet experience. Most of our flying domestically and in Florida is private FBO to private FBO. The Caribbean is unique because we're working off of connectivity, so we have to be in the main terminal, which is not our first choice, but it makes it more convenient for the client. So what we've done is we've created our own layer of specialness, if you will, in that environment that is otherwise not special. Yeah. So we have a beautiful private lounge. We have concierges running around meeting you from your airline gates and so forth, and it's really a nice experience, certainly as compared to going through another hub.
Totally. Well, and you've created that FBO type experience. You have champagne. You have everything you need. It's not like you're you're not roughing it.
No, it's a nice experience, and it feels very private, feels very exclusive, and people are really looking for that.
And St. Bart's, as far as number of daily flights this time of year, that's still your top destination in the Eastern Caribbean?
It is. Okay. It is. I should mention that we had a high water mark hit on January 4th, which was the day after the shutdown in the Eastern Caribbean. So we had a otherwise huge day of flying that all had to get smushed into the next 3 days. And so on January 4th, we ran 110 flights in the Caribbean, 66 alone for St. Bart's.
It's incredible.
Yeah. So
moving a lot of people.
That was a hell of a day. And it brought me back to the old days because I was running around on the ramp helping out, and my brother was flying. So.
I figured Eric was flying. I just assumed. That's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. So then talk to us about Florida and what you're doing down there with the Bahamas.
So Florida's always been on our radar. Similar to the Caribbean, the level of kind of equipment and service has been pretty poor traditionally, so we knew it was a place that again we could add a lot of value with much better equipment, much better service, hospitality focused. It was really just a matter of time, and as I mentioned before, sustainability is everything for me. So we didn't want to overstretch in the early days, and then finally 3 years ago we decided, okay, we're ready. We're taking on new aircraft. We had a big order of 20 new aircraft from Pilatus, as you know, and now's the time. And so initially we flew private charter, just sort of anywhere. And then this past year we developed our first scheduled routes down there. And I should mention that's usually the transition for us, is that we don't we're not going to decide where people are flying. We are accommodating where you already want to go.
Okay.
And so the private charter activity that we did for that first year really instructed where is the greatest demand for a regularly scheduled flight. And so we're operating now 5 different routes. So Marsh Harbor, North Eleuthera, and Nassau are the destinations. And we're flying Marsh Harbor and Eleuthera from Stewart, which is just north of Palm Beach, and also Fort Lauderdale, and then Nassau is out of Stewart. We started off in Palm Beach, but there are a lot of challenges when the TFR, the flight restrictions are in place. We'll probably move back there soon. But it's been really great, and we've doubled down, actually tripled down. We've tripled the service coming into this year to those destinations, and it's going great. FBO to FBO, really seamless experience. For a lot of the people flying there, well, number one, it's a lot of the same clients, you know, the snowbirds coming down from the northeast to the southeast. I know you're the Colorado world. You don't see this every day, but it's very much a part of our Eastern culture is that when it gets cold, you go down south.
You take a Tradewind bird south.
And you spend your winter. That's your program down there, your Palm Beach or wherever program. And so it was really plug and play because there are so many people who already knew us, knew the brand, and we're thrilled that we started service down there. So we've got the fleet pretty much evenly scattered right now this time of year, and then come summertime, some of those planes come out and support a very, very busy summertime up here. Yeah.
Yeah, because in the summer, how many flights a day are you typically operating between Vineyard and Nantucket?
Oh gosh, on the scheduled flights alone, it's somewhere around 40 flights between those destinations. And then you add in another 40, 50, 60 private charters. And it's not uncommon for us to be flying 120, 150, and those are revenue flights. Then you have all of your empty legs and so forth packed in. So it takes a village. We have an amazing team. We have 350 people now, and just an incredible team making it all happen every day.
Yeah. That's a good segue into company culture. So, I know everybody that we work with at Tradewind, it's for many, many years that we've been working together, everybody that works on Tradewind has nothing but positive things to say about your team. And that's not necessarily the case with every other client that I have. So why is that the case? How do you take care of your people? What's the culture at Tradewind like? Yeah. How do you train? How do you develop people? I think that's a better word than train. So.
Yeah, no, good question. It really starts with, reminding ourselves frequently of why we started this. We started this to really bring the humanity back to aviation. If you compare it, of course, if you compare it to a Gulfstream flight, service level is very, very high. But on the airlines, as we all know, it's not quite the same. So when you're running a scheduled flight, not only are we flying from the private FBOs where you save time, but we take it very seriously that we are. That hospitality is our focus. We happen to fly airplanes, but hospitality is really what we do. And that, caring about what our clients need is at the forefront of the culture. We hire for it. We hire for hospitality. We train for aviation. In the case of the pilots, no, because they have to come in with experience. But it starts at the hiring process. And then we make sure that we integrate it into everything every touch point for training. So in the pilot's case, and pilots are quite important for this because they're really on our front lines. Yeah. So we have concierges and so forth and ground staff, but the pilots are really interacting much more so than an airline pilot would with our clients. And so at every step of their recurrent training, which happens pretty frequently, there's a customer service component to it, and because it's just critically important. And the nice thing, and I don't have experience working for a place that doesn't have customer service, so I don't know how you mess it up necessarily. But I can say that when you train for it and when you hire people who really are all about caring for others, have that culture going. When they have those wins, when they solve a problem for people, when anyone solves a problem for someone. Especially if their hospitality minds have that mindset, it's incredibly rewarding. You know? And so reinforcing those moments is very important to us. We send surveys out and we interact with clients after their trip quite often. And when we get that positive feedback, Jane helped me with my this and my that and my dog, and it's just the best, and we love you guys. We will circulate that through the entire organization and say, hey, Jane, awesome job. And people really thrive when they see that, and we reinforce it every step of the way. But again, at the root of it, I think that people do like giving those wins, but you have to give them the latitude to do it, right? You can't be too strict, too structured. At our size, you do need policies, procedures, and training on how things normally go. But the key is giving people the space to be creative, to solve a problem outside of what we would normally do. And if people are given that space to do that and then execute on it, it's incredibly rewarding. Yeah.
So public praising.
Yeah. Public praising, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, it's important. We try to lead by example as well. I mentioned Eric and I sometimes out there and running around, and when it's kind of by osmosis happens as well. And we're a private company, and people take their cues from leadership, and ultimately Eric and I, we think often about the future where maybe it's a larger organization that we're potentially under, and that I think is increasingly difficult to maintain that culture in those environments.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And people also, I feel like they, when they're publicly praised and they look at leadership, and it's a family company, right? And so you just want to do better than when you're working for just some public corporation or, shareholders. It's just not the same.
Right. There's no face to it. There's no personality to it. And, the last thing that we want is, in a typical airline environment, there's a real us versus them mentality.
Yeah.
Line people, pilots, what have you, and corporate,
Yeah.
And, that is, it's terrible for culture, and we know that there's a tendency in the aviation world to go that way, and so we're hyper focused on making sure that doesn't happen, and not by telling people not to do it, but inspiring them to enjoy what they do.
Totally. Now, how about pilots? You guys have a very good program for pilots to be able to transition into airlines, because ultimately, right, the larger the aircraft, the more money they'll be able to make, the further they're going in their career, right? So
we call it big jet syndrome.
Okay.
So, we typically have pilots a little bit earlier in their career, there have been, most people know, varying levels of pilot shortages.
Yep.
Especially the most recent one coming out of the pandemic, when most of the airlines, kind of forced retirement for a lot of people, then realized 6 months later
we're short people to fly.
We needed them.
Yeah.
And what that does is suck pilots out of our system more quickly than they otherwise would transition. And so those are really, really tough on an organization such as ours. In fact, some smaller operators like us had to go out of business. It really just was kind of a death blow. And so we made some strategic moves about 6-7 years ago to instead of worrying about and kind of competing with the airlines who might take our pilots, let's work with them. And so we have 2 different programs, one with JetBlue, one with United, and they call them gateway programs or flow-through programs, where first they go to one of the bigger airlines, which is where they ultimately want to fly.
Okay.
We'd prefer, of course, they fly with us for their whole career, but we're realistic about it. They go to that airline. They're not quite there in their career, but if they're accepted into that program and they vet them very carefully, then they enter our program, and they fly with us for a required amount of time before they can then get that job with JetBlue or United. And it works very, very well. It gives us visibility into how long we're going to have them. Planning and so forth is much easier, and it's a career path. I mean, with any company, everyone is much more inspired and works harder if they know that there's a next move that they desire. So those programs are working really quite well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. As far as landing in St. Bart's, I mean, it's a challenging landing. So does Eric still train everybody that lands in St. Bart's?
We have a massive training organization with lots of different people, leadership, and so forth. But yes, Eric still likes to jump in there and do the training. The thing about that runway and that landing is that it might seem, treacherous to some. But there's a system to doing it, and if you train for that properly and you execute properly, it's benign. It just looks and feels funny.
Right.
And we have we've been doing this. We've been landing in St. Bart's for 20 years now, and lots of experience all through the ranks, and we have a very regimented program for training to that landing. But yeah, my brother does love doing it. He does sub in for training from time to time. I mentioned before, he's really the propeller head. In his spare time, he flies vintage warbirds and air shows.
He's flown them all the way to Europe and everything, right?
He is.
Yeah.
And he dropped paratroopers over Normandy for the 75th and 80th anniversary of D-Day. So he any excuse to jump in an airplane and he's there. Yeah,
that's incredible. That's incredible. As far as we've talked a lot about sort of the overall Tradewind experience and where you're located. How about technology? How do you guys leverage technology? Not necessarily, of course, avionics, right? But more from your side on the commercial side as well as operations. How do you guys leverage technology at Tradewind to improve the customer experience?
Yeah, technology is it's critically important for efficiencies. But to your question around customer experience, and that is really the holy grail of being able to anticipate needs, anticipate what people want or need before they need it. That's really where we try to employ the most technology. For example, a lot of our connectivity in the Caribbean depends on the airline connections and how the airlines are operating. If they're running late, we don't want somebody showing up without a flight because they missed it. We want to be in touch with them before that even happens. And we do that quite often. We reach out and we reschedule, or we talk through different options. So we use technology quite heavily to tap into those programs, tap into flight tracking to really get ahead of things so that we can then be proactive in creating a better experience. Same thing with weather and so forth. So we rely pretty heavily on technology. In terms of the kind of this normal stuff that you would think about with aviation booking, having control over your booking, self-service tools, and so on. But we're very careful with technology in the sense that we are in many ways the anti-airline, right? There are some airlines that won't even talk to you, right?
Yeah.
It's only the app.
Most.
And and forget about if something's gone wrong, you can't get them on the phone to make a change. So we want to be very available to our clients. And, that day I mentioned, January 4th, we took 2,000 calls between the 3rd and the 4th. And so we have a big infrastructure for taking those calls because we want to have that high level of service. At the same time, if everything's going well, people do want to be able to do things on their own. So we invest heavily in technology to be able to enable those tools, but we don't do it at the expense of. We're not looking at it as cost-saving measure. We can get rid of 30 customer service people if we have a better app. We don't look at it that way. There's a balance between the two.
Totally. How about AI?
AI is interesting. Yeah, we've employed it in several areas. The most exciting for me is schedule optimization. We run, you imagine 35, 36 airplanes. In all different places. You can do that. If you do that inefficiently, you're spending literally tens of thousands of dollars more than you have to. And in the early days, you could look at our schedule and say, okay, how do I optimize this? And if it was 5, 6, 7 airplanes, you could really, a human could kind of see that pretty well. But I think it was the Malcolm Gladwell thing, the human mind can keep track of 7 things at a time, and beyond that, forget it.
Forget it, yeah.
And that's exactly what happened to us when we got to 8, 9, 10 airplanes and now 35. No individual can really look at the schedule and say, okay, I'm going to solve this puzzle well.
Totally.
You can't really see the matrix. We have a couple of people who can see the matrix, but that's not scalable. So we're employing AI to really to be able to solve those puzzles. That's very important. And then on the customer service side, we have a pretty robust CRM now, and what we're doing is we're collecting data that helps us serve people better and also market to them better, give them more relevant information. So translating their travel patterns and what we know about them into the most relevant next communication that they might want to hear, and then also when they are traveling with us, translating that into when and how we should be solving for whatever disruption or whatever problem is going on. So we've just started to scratch the surface, really, on all of those things. But it's really exciting stuff. Efficiency for us, efficiency for any charter operator specifically. Scheduled operators, pure scheduled operators, they can build their schedule efficiently.
Yes.
And that's what they're selling.
It goes and it comes back, so it's on schedule.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In the charter world, you don't know what's going to book.
Yep.
And you don't even know the night before what the next day is going to look like. And so to the extent that we can optimize better and better, it actually brings our cost down. And then our cost to the customer can be more reasonable.
Yeah, from a commercial perspective, well, from a savings perspective, if you can minimize or make empty legs as efficient as possible, I would think with that, that would massive cost differences in terms of your ability to sell at a more strategic pricing, and therefore get more customers from a commercial acquisition perspective too. So it'd help you on both sides.
Yeah. I wouldn't expect prices necessarily in the private charter business to go down, but it helps kind of slow that down a little bit. All of our costs are higher every year, of
course,
particularly our human resources. And we have 150 pilots now and growing, and those are real costs. But if we can save on that empty leg and so forth, that makes quite a bit of difference. The other thing is, when you think about schedule optimization, it's really multi-dimensional. It's not just which airplane should go where. It's which crew am I putting on that? How are they getting from this place to that place for the next flight? Where are we putting them in a hotel? What's the most efficient way to solve for that a jigsaw puzzle, really?
A true jigsaw puzzle, 100%. Now, as far as travel advisors, we've talked a lot about technology, direct distribution. How important are travel advisors to your business?
Critically important. The Caribbean especially, when we entered that market, we knew that the relationships were already very strong with the luxury hotels and the luxury travel advisors in that space. Those folks who provide an incredible level of added value and service, really having them on your team, if you will, and then as a result booking with you, was really, really important. And so we made a conscious decision, number one, to make sure that our flights were in the GDS, because the travel, at the time at least, the travel travel advisor world lives within there. But we really did the rounds. We sat with the top. We visited and still do the top agencies. We are a virtuoso approved operator. We attend the shows and really face to face with all of the advisors. And to their credit, they are they've seen lots of fly-by-nights come along, no pun intended. And so it was a combination of the relationships and the trust to build, but then the execution, right? How well did we execute for their clients, and then reinforcing that along the way. Fortunately, we really stood out to them as a great solution at the time to go to St. Bart's. And now we have very, very strong relationships with them. A lot of people ask me, what about commissions? Don't you, do you really like paying commissions? I said, yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to.
The best thing to pay, yeah.
It's the best thing to pay. And they, there's such an incredible value there that they provide. And we have, now 20 years of working with travel advisors, some really tight and wonderful relationships. And I always tell the story. Early on, I was sitting at I think it was a beach club or a restaurant in St. Bart's, and there was a snowstorm in New York, and all of the people who were traveling the next day, who were getting the pings from their airline saying your flight's canceled, they were all walking out of the restaurant to get on the phone and try to get somebody to help them out. The ones with the infrastructure behind them, the travel advisor, they were enjoying their meal, and I could see it, and I still see that to this day.
Totally, and at the end of the day, too, right? They know the experience that you are able to provide. Therefore, it's much easier for them to insure their high net worth clients or than fly on Tradewind. They get it. They understand the experience, and a good one at least does.
Yeah. And the other thing is, like, the ecosystem we're just one part of it, right? There's the hotel, there's the car service, there are the restaurants and so forth, and we're part of that larger ecosystem. The travel advisor, the good ones, sees that all together holistically and we don't, right?
Yeah.
And the hotel or the restaurant doesn't on their own, but the person who puts the whole trip together sees that, and they can identify areas to make it even better for the customer.
Totally. What are you most proud of at Tradewind? Like, what are you personally? Like, what moment or moments, if you have a couple of them, that you're just personally most proud of?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. I don't stop too much to. Well, I mean, Condé Nast has awarded us a top airline 5 years now running. So
Congratulations!
Super proud of that. And I guess what I'm most proud of is even at 350 team members, we've built an incredible team of people who are really all on the same page as far as customer service and hospitality is concerned. I mentioned that, when you look in kind of peer companies within the space, particularly the large airlines, that's definitely not always the case.
Right.
So just seeing that every day is just, I'm just incredibly proud of it.
Amazing.
We talk a lot about culture, and we talk about scale and culture, and it becomes increasingly difficult, and we're hyper focused on it. But again, I'm proud of the fact that we are where we are today with a team all running in the same direction, and excited about hospitality.
It's impressive. And last, what's exciting that's coming up in the next short term, few months, or a year from now? What's next for Tradewind?
Crystal ball.
Okay.
So, well, you mean for Tradewind?
For Tradewind, yeah. Or
so,
you.
So I mentioned before, we made a conscious decision and still operate the company in a way where we're very hyper focused on sustainability, which means measured and metered growth. We don't want to get over our skis. To give you a Colorado thing, not this winter, but so growth. We're growing at about 20% a year, which is actually pretty substantial growth. But we're not looking to spread all over the world tomorrow. So the next couple of years, more expansion in Florida, the Bahamas.
Okay.
We've only just scratched the surface in those markets, serving 3 different destinations from 2 different airports. I see the Southeast area, the Southeast market for us becoming as big or even bigger than the Northeast market for us, which is about 5x what the Southeast is right now. So additional destinations. I think what you'll probably see, we're very well known for kind of luxury destinations or second home destinations. We're eyeballing some routes that are more kind of your business travel routes, where we're adding the same value. I mean, ultimately, what we do is about saving time. The true luxury is saving time. It's not necessarily about Tradewind. It's about solving the efficiency problem for people. The luxury is what you do when you get there.
Yeah.
Right? And so we do lots and lots of things to create this wonderful level of service that stands out from other ways to get there. But we always remind ourselves that we're not the star of the show. It's all about what they intend to do, what the purpose is for their travel. Our tagline, fly personal. Some people say, well, it's because you personalize the experience. And yes, to some extent we do, but it's more about the reason that we exist and what we're solving for people is personal to them. Right? It's that trip to St. Bart's, it's this or that. Going back to efficiency and time savings, we like to say time is the true currency, And so business travel, some of those routes, if you talk about inter-Florida, they're very difficult to do, particularly with the airlines up in the Northeast here. And then if we're going further out, 5 years or so, we'll likely be looking at new bases of operations, moving west, perhaps in your neighborhood at some point.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because it's with private aviation, right? Time, as you mentioned, the especially for high net worth individuals and high performing business people, you just can't get any more of it, right? It's very limited. And on an international flight or a very long haul flight, the private aviation advantage begins to dwindle a little bit, right? Because the amount of time that it takes to get to the airport and go through security and so forth is a much smaller percentage of the total time that you need if you're flying on a 12-hour flight, right? but you guys, you completely, you are at the peak of it, because on these short flights, right, the amount of time you spend dealing with commercial aviation, getting to the airport, parking, going through TSA, and that entire experience, and then leaving, the same thing, right? To do a day trip is very, very challenging, right? Almost impossible.
You're spending more time in the airport than you are in the air.
Exactly.
And no matter how well that airline did at their service, it still leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
It sure does.
3 hours of non-flying travel for a 45-minute flight is just a terrible experience.
Yeah, or 4 hours for an hour and a half flight even, right?
Exactly.
And you shave all of that off, and you make it so that you can be home with your family for dinner.
Exactly.
And it's so, it's just so much easier. So that I feel like you guys just hit it on the head when you started Tradewind, as far as the short distance flights are where you can really see the most efficiency.
Yeah, and it's really by no fault of the airlines. They live within a structure that they have to operate in, and, and you have the long lines in the big airports and the TSA and all of that. And so, frankly, I don't know why they do short routes. I think it's to support the rest of their network, because it isn't a nice experience. Again, even if they do their best, even if they did a great job. So you strip out that traditional kind of airline terminal experience, and also boarding and getting off the plane. The smaller airplanes, when we land here at Westchester, you're in your car 5 minutes later.
Exactly.
You're not waiting for the entire airplane to disembark.
In the heated porte-cochere.
Exactly, in the heated portico and a Starbucks along the way.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're thrilled about this space. It's a unique space. It's been good to us. I think the next sort of future phase for this business is really, there are lots of exciting things happening within electrification of aircraft.
Yep.
Eventually autonomous aircraft, although we were just talking about it. I don't know how quickly people will become comfortable with that, but the technology is there.
Yeah.
And so we'll start to see some pretty interesting things come along. And when we think about that space, the electrification space and so forth, what we do is perfect for that, because it's not going to be, you won't be flying on an electrified 737 that, that goes straight up, and then that's not coming anytime soon, because batteries are heavy, et cetera, et cetera. Where it is coming sooner is on smaller aircraft on shorter routes, and that's exactly what we do. So we're very excited about that space as it comes along.
That's amazing. So I finished with 3 rapid fire questions. So you don't have to think much on them, but they're easy. What personal travel are you most excited for next?
Personal travel.
Yes, fun.
So, fun. Okay, so once a year, my brother and I do a heli skiing trip out Western Canada, and that's coming up in March. So that's I would say that's the most exciting.
And you have snow up there.
I hope so. We'll see.
They'll find the snow
more than Colorado at this point.
Well, and you don't rely on a lift, so they'll find the snow for you.
Exactly.
What do you miss? Well, I'll say that this question is about the past, because the show is about innovation and moving forward, but the past shapes the future. So what do you miss about the glamorous days of travel?
The civility. Yeah. More specifically, and lots of people say it, and it irks me too, just the way people dress. Yeah. And when I was a kid, my mother was very traditional, and those were also different days. I'm aging myself a bit here. She would make sure I was wearing a collared shirt, and there was no other way that you dress to go fly. And people definitely don't think about that anymore. Pajamas is pretty common in the airport.
Very, yeah.
And I think, and this is not wagging the finger at people, it might sound this way, but I think the service level that you get in return is a reflection of how you, the effort that you put in.
You'd appreciate my son David, because he, when he flies, he always wants to wear a sport coat like that and a collared shirt. So whenever he flies with me, first thing he does when he gets up in the morning, it's khakis, it's a sport coat and a collared shirt.
I would love to see a dress code on airlines. Yeah, that sounds pretty nice. Maybe excessive, but
yeah. But and last, what innovation in travel doesn't exist today that you think is missing? And it does not have to be technology. I always give the example Jan Arnold at Roccoforte said, which is that the luggage racks are too small in hotel rooms for international travelers. Make them bigger. So what innovation is missing?
I would say, and I think we're close. There's several companies working on this. Is really that end-to-end holistic, that full journey look. We talked about travel advisors adding so much value in that regard. I think that they're there certainly is the capability of the technology to kind of put that all together in more of a seamless way. Considering all the different kind of machinations, and then also on the fly figuring out what to do when things are delayed or changing. That's kind of a technology play. I think that's quite exciting. But again, with any of those things, particularly in the luxury space or the premium space, the human factor can't be left behind. Mm-hmm. It's very, very important. Let's see, what's missing? You mean in aviation, just generally?
Maybe you could do aviation, since I don't have a lot of aviation folk on the podcast.
Yeah, good question. I think, there must be a more efficient way of getting people through the airports in the traditional system, and I'm speaking for my colleagues on the kind of the other side of aviation.
Not your problem. But
it's, even design of aircraft, you look at narrow body aircraft, and this isn't going to change anytime soon, but
boarding.
Why do we only have one entrance to an airplane that fits 200 people? And there are many reasons why, right?
Yeah.
But they're not insurmountable. More efficient, better design to create better efficiency. Again, time is the true currency. Mm-hmm. No matter what level you're flying in, if you're flying Spirit or you're flying Tradewind, you're flying in a Gulfstream, that is not the experience should be very nice, but ultimately it's getting to where you're going and giving that time back to people. So I would love to see. Actually, probably self-servingly, no, but but as a customer of airline travel, the more focus on that efficiency piece, and I know everyone's hyper focused on it, but there are some structural things that would need to be changed and could be changed to shorten the amount of time that it takes to get through an airport.
Totally. Thank you, David. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome.
Thanks for watching this episode of Luxury Travel Innovators. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. See you next time.